Years after she disappeared, the telephone would still ring in her parents' house. They would lift the receiver and a man's voice would be waiting. He would ask if they were related to Dorothy Scott, and then, calm and unhurried, he would tell them that he had her. On one call, he described exactly what Dorothy had been wearing the night she vanished, a detail the police had never made public. Most missing person cases leave behind silence. This one left a voice, and the voice would not stop. This is the unsolved disappearance of Dorothy Jane Scott, a careful young mother who walked into a hospital parking lot one night in 1980 and was never seen alive again. By the end of this, you will know about the threats that came before, the night she sped away into the dark, the 4 years of phone calls that tormented her family, and the single chilling call that finally ended them. Stay with me. Anaheim, California, 1980. Dorothy Jane Scott was 32 years old, a devoted single mother to a young son. By every account, she was careful and responsible. She did not drink, did not take chances, and worried about her boy. She was not the kind of person who went looking for danger. Danger, it turned out, came looking for her. For months before that night, Dorothy had been receiving anonymous phone calls. Some were strange and tender, a stranger telling her he loved her. Others were pure threat. One caller promised that when he got her alone, he would cut her into pieces so that no one would ever find her. She became frightened. She began to take precautions. She never learned who the voice belonged to, but the voice clearly knew her. On the evening of May 28, 1980, Dorothy attended a staff meeting with co-workers. One of them, a man, had an arm badly swollen from what looked like an insect bite. Dorothy, always the caretaker, offered to drive him and another colleague to the hospital in nearby Orange. It was a small act of kindness. It would be the last thing anyone ever saw her freely choose to do. At the hospital, the man was treated and released. It was near 11 at night. Dorothy told the others she would bring her car around to the entrance to collect them, and she walked off into the dim parking lot alone. A few minutes later, they saw her white station wagon pull up. And then something was wrong. The headlights suddenly blazed on, the engine revved hard, and the car lurched forward and tore off into the night, tires screeching as though she were fleeing something, or being forced. Her two co-workers stood at the entrance, confused, certain she would circle back. She did not. Dorothy Jane Scott never returned. And hours later, 10 miles away, her car was discovered in an alley in Santa Ana, fully engulfed in flames. The vehicle had been deliberately set alight. Of Dorothy herself, there was no trace at all. The investigation found almost nothing to hold on to. No body. No witnesses to the moment she was taken. No obvious motive. Had someone been hiding in the back seat? Had she been ambushed in the lot? A cautious, sober young mother had pulled her car around a hospital, and in the space of a few minutes, she had simply ceased to exist. And then, only days after she vanished, the telephone began to ring. A man started calling Dorothy's parents and also the local newspaper, the Santa Ana Register. It was always a man, and often the calls came on a Wednesday, the same day of the week that she had disappeared. He would ask if they were related to Dorothy, and he would tell them plainly that he had killed her. For a while, the police hoped it was only a cruel prankster feeding on a tragedy. But then, a reporter at the Register managed to keep the man talking during one of his calls, and the caller described, in detail, the clothing Dorothy had been wearing on the night she disappeared. It was accurate, and it was information the investigators had deliberately kept from the public. Whoever was on that telephone had been there when she was taken. From that moment, the calls were no longer a hoax. They were a confession, repeated again and again. For nearly 4 years, the man kept calling. He taunted Dorothy's grieving parents. He haunted the reporters. Her young son grew older without his mother, while a patient, deliberate voice phoned in to gloat. The police traced what calls they could. Every lead dissolved into nothing. Then, in August of 1984, more than 4 years after she vanished, a construction worker clearing brush in the hills near the highway came across human bones, a skull, and lying among the remains, a turquoise ring that Dorothy's family recognized at once. After 4 long years, Dorothy Jane Scott had finally been found. And here the story turns from heartbreaking to genuinely chilling. On the very day that news of the discovery broke, the caller phoned the family one final time. He asked, as he always did, whether Dorothy was home. When he was told that her remains had just been found, the line fell silent. He hung up, and after 4 years of torment, the phone calls stopped, completely and forever. Consider what that last call reveals. The man on the phone knew Dorothy was dead long before her body was found. He had tracked the case for 4 years, and he stopped the very instant she was recovered, as though his game only worked while she was lost. To the investigators, the implication was almost impossible to escape. The voice on the telephone belonged to the person who had murdered her. But who was he? The theories pointed toward a stalker, someone who had studied her routine closely enough to know exactly where she would be that night. Others wondered about people in her own circle. The earlier threats, the precision, the sheer patience of it, all suggested a mind utterly fixated on her. And yet, in more than 40 years, no name has ever held, no arrest, no charge, nothing. So what do we truly know? That Dorothy Jane Scott was stalked, then abducted, then killed. That her murderer taunted her family by telephone for 4 years and was never identified. And that somewhere, perhaps, a man who knew exactly what she wore on her final night is still walking free. The case remains open to this day. Most disappearances are defined by absence, by the silence where a person used to be. This one was defined by a voice. A man who refused to let Dorothy rest, who called and called, who turned a mother's murder into a private amusement that lasted 4 years. The cruelty of it is hard to even hold in the mind. And the most unbearable part is also the simplest. We still have no idea whose voice it was. A careful mother, a car speeding into the dark, a burning wreck in an alley, and a voice that called her family for 4 years, then vanished the moment she was found. Dorothy Jane Scott is still waiting for an answer. The next file we open is not a person but a sound, a noise that drove an entire village to the edge of madness and that no instrument on earth could ever locate. Subscribe so it finds you. This is Black Salt Ledger.